Da, 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 da. It never ends. I do these intros. Da 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 da. Poorly sung Jurassic Park. Joe hates my guts.
I would join in. It's just over this. It's going to be completely out of time if we both sing at the same time.
Yeah, even if we sync up the audio, it's going to be terrible.
Anyway,
welcome back to 2MoreTakes. My name is Jack.
My name is Joe.
And I'm not even going to introduce the film today because it's not my bag. It's
not
yours.
My bag. It's not. No, I've stolen.
It's not my bag, baby.
This one.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we decided it's the summary times. Kind of start talking about some blockbustery summary films, right? And
yeah, I guess that slipped my mind when we just hit and record now because we're doing despite the fact that we've planned it out extensively, more so obviously than we've ever done before. But yeah, it's Blockbuster season, baby. We're going to be doing a total of 7 episodes for this next 3 months, so that should hopefully be exciting to a few folks. And if not, I'll stab you.
Good.
Yeah.
But today we're kicking off with another one of my favourite films, actually. But if you couldn't tell from Jack's marvellous rendition of the theme tune, today we're talking about Jurassic Park. And we're talking about the 1993 original film, not any of the others. There'll be some mentions, but let's not... I'll say now, I enjoy The Lost World. I enjoy that film, but the rest of them, not so much. But the first one...
Yeah, I can sort of I can agree with that, just in the general sense. Obviously, we'll get more into it. We're not talking about the whole series, but we can reference it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I share similar sentiments, I feel.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, I've seen Jurassic Park many a time, but I know you rewatched it recently, Jack. How did you find that?
Yeah, well, to be fair, I've been rewatching it, a few times, for the last few years, because it was on Netflix until very recently.
Yep.
And originally, I think we were going to do another watch party between us.
But they
where we were going to do a viewing, but
they removed it.
But yeah, just like Blues Brothers, they fucking yanked it right as we were wanting to watch it. Mm-hmm. Except obviously last time we did actually watch Blues Brothers, but obviously that comes off and on of.
Yeah, it came back on. You enjoyed it, yes? The dinosaurs.
No, I hated it, Joe. What's wrong with? Yeah, no, I thought it was great.
But yeah, so Jurassic Park, 1993, Steven Spielberg, in his prime. Did a lot really...
I see you also have the Wikipedia
open.
No,
this is memory.
This is memory? Okay, fair
I know
enough.
my Jurassic Park.
I forgot what year it was for Jurassic Park, because obviously I'm a bit less familiar with it. Oh my god, you know what? I'm also a dum-dum, because as I've informed Joe before we start recording the podcast, like most podcasts we record now, I have, the Blu-ray in front of me, because I'm hoarding a General Grievous-sized sort of collection of Blu-rays. Joe is holding the VHS equivalent of that, more so. You're like Smaug sitting on the top of a pile of gold there. But yeah, on the back of it, it says the year. It's 1993. Mm-hmm. I just didn't bother checking because I do have the wiki out in front of me, just because I wanted to confirm a few details.
But yeah, so Steven Spielberg's pretty. When we were looking at what films to do for summary blockbusters, Steven Spielberg did come up a few times actually, because he's probably one of the masters of a good summer blockbuster that everyone comes down to watch. Because you got...
Yeah, I was going to say, if just in terms of, I guess, a weird metaphor and a weird analogy, like I always do, if George Lucas is good at sprinting, Steven Spielberg is, good at marathons, cross-country running.
Yeah.
He's got the endurance to him, whereas, George Lucas got there a bit quicker, but... again, Jaws obviously is infamous for being the first, or supposedly the first. I'm sure some actually comment somewhere would be actually it's not the first. Just like everyone sort of cites The Jazz Singer as the first sort of film with sound in it. But yeah, I mean, as you say, just Spielberg, he is that sort of archetypal representation of what a blockbuster is. Like,
Yeah.
most of his films are summer, like, even if they weren't released in summer. Although I think most of them are, because you said that list that we sort of scoured through had plenty of Spielberg films in it. It's to the point where we were like, should we put like Indiana Jones on the list? And then you're like, it's Steven Spielberg. I'm like, could Steve stop making movies? He's making too many.
No, he's the master of basically, because I wouldn't say a lot of what he does is not particularly unique on its own, because he does it in all of his films, and a lot of other films copy that, and they've done it before. But Spielberg is like, he knows how to put a basic plot and a basic story together, and then make it fun and interesting for like every age range, I would say. Like, he does a good job at making a film that everyone can enjoy. So and also just like, when you're talking about like that sort of that element that he has, the sort of, I guess you could consider it like not like a visual style, but sort of like a thematic style of making it, those films very accessible to families. Although it does range, because obviously I think Indiana Jones, although a lot of kids have seen it, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a kids' film. It depends.
I think it depends what era you're living in. If it's the 80s, it's a kids' film. If it's modern day, it's PG-13.
Yeah, it depends, but like a lot of his films, they range from like PG to like 12 sort of range. There's a few U's in there. He does some more kid-friendly stuff, and then there's
I was surprised to learn that Jurassic Park was a PG, but then when I actually rewatched it, I kind of saw it, because they kind of cut away from most of the what you could consider like violent, gory stuff.
Well, that's what I mean. It is technically a kid-friendly film. It's like, kids and adults can enjoy the film and enjoy some dinosaurs. But it does have
part of that has to. Sorry, I was going to say, go on.
No, but it does have those horror graphic bits where people get eaten by dinosaurs, and they show little bits, but not too much, and it's that's they can get away with what they do show. So, but go ahead.
Well, that's the thing, is that as well they couldn't show much at the time. But obviously they compensated for that with what they could show. Obviously what they did in Alien, where you just don't show the monster for a lot of time, and you build suspense through other aspects of filmmaking. So before we move on to that, so one of the things I was going to say before is that, so obviously you have that elements concurrent in Steven Spielberg movies of the show schmaltzy, like family stuff, and not just like that dynamic which is repeated in some of his films, but more so again it's like that accessibility on a on a customer, like an audience level for making these movies, and that's something that I think is replicated not in a one-to-one level, but in a sort of shoddy recreation in a lot of modern filmmakers. I think he is an inspiration to a lot of them, and there is actually one in particular who has tried to make Steven Spielberg films but can't.
Yeah.
But I think we should. That's an interesting thing we could get into later without going on too many tangents. But yeah.
Yeah. But so Jurassic Park is I know it's based around a book, but I think they take their own liberties.
Well, the screenplay is by the same guy who wrote the book, which is Michael Crichton, who's I think he's a very famous science fiction author. I've heard his name popping up a lot. I've never written anything by Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
I've never read anything by Michael Crichton, but he's a name that's popped up a lot. His last name, I think, is actually referenced in the show Farscape, which we discussed in the last podcast, because the main character is called John Crichton. But he's definitely a well-known name within the science fiction writing and literature community. So,
but the film adapts the book and basically takes its own twist on everything for the most part. But Spielberg does his job at creating the world. That, along with, as I said, Michael Crichton comes back to sort of adapt a script for it, and the plot itself for the film is quite simple, for the most part. It's your simple, there's a bad guy, there's these good guys, something goes wrong, disaster happens, dinosaurs get let loose, and, bad guy gets his comeuppance and the good guys escape. That's pretty much it. But it's the journey of it. It's the adventure. It's the way that they, using CGI and cinematic goodness, they create dinosaurs. And this theme park, they make a believable theme park of dinosaurs for the most part.
Well, actually, this is not specific. This is not. I just did it to you. I just did it. Actually,
yeah.
In my opinion, I don't entirely agree, but I don't entirely disagree.
Yeah.
But also, I would also point out that this is not necessarily a for or against thing. This is again talking about like the showing and the not showing. Is that it's funny that it's like they're showing like a dinosaur park being created and it's all realistic.
Yeah.
When in actuality that's part of the I guess the point's at the middle of the film where they're actually going around and it's before the dinosaurs are let out and all that. They're touring the park, and the sort of running joke is that none of the dinosaurs are turning up to be on the tour.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. See, Jurassic Park has this thing. It fits in with not only just the we'll reveal the dinosaurs later when the danger is present, and so there's the suspense of where are the dinosaurs? Where are they? And then they appear when everything goes wrong. But also, it's that sense of they're there to be on show, but they don't see them. Half the dinosaurs are just hiding because they don't want to be seen. And as
Well, it's just like animals, aren't they? You go to like a safari or a safari park, and you might see like the lions or the monkeys or something like that. But there'll be some if it's like large enough, like most of the time the animals just want you to fuck off. They're just chilling, like.
I mean,
as you say, that they want to just be left alone.
Yeah, and these dinosaurs have some pretty large spaces to roam in, so it's difficult.
Yeah,
like they've got one T-Rex, and probably like an acre of land for it, and it's like
there's actually something in that the T-Rex pen that I'm actually interested to talk to you about at some point. Although,
I think I know what you'll. But I was just going to say, in regards to the dinosaurs want to be left alone. And it's the idea that the plot is simple enough for the most part. It has a couple of twists, I would say, but it's more of there is the moral question that is put in there, isn't there? Of the life breaks free, life cannot be contained. You you bring back dinosaurs from the dead and try and control them, encage them, and then it's going to go wrong. And there's a little bit of that moral question of, is it right to bring dinosaurs back to life? Is it right to keep animals in captivity, even sort of a little bit? But that is what they dwell on in the story at certain points. They have that conversation in the middle of the film, don't they, with Goldblum, and life finds a way. So
yeah, his whole monologue, the good old Goldblum. I mean, I think that a lot of the intellectualization of that, I think, comes from the basis of it originally starting off as a science fiction novel. Not a hard sci-fi, but you know what I mean. Like it's cloning dinosaurs and then putting frog DNA in there to sort of fill in the genetic gaps.
Yeah.
But I've not read the Jurassic Park novels, so I don't know firsthand. But I'm pretty sure that from what I've heard and what I've sort of read outside of the book elsewhere, that it's quite sort of technical with the its attempts at trying to be scientific. It's more sort of technical rather than what Spielberg has, which is obviously the more sort of emotional, exciting cinematic storytelling. And I think because of that, because I'm stuck in that perception of I've seen the movie but not read the book. I think that when you were talking about like the themes of that, the way I sort of thought of it is like, okay, well, those elements are obviously there. They actually, they in fact talk about them in that dinner that you're talking about. But I do feel like, in a way, if it, again, without the knowledge of the book and what kind of thematic resonance, if it is about, captivity, and it's an allegory for that. Because if it's an allegory for that, it is a bit of a bizarre one, I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
But I do think that the intellectual themes there, I do think that is the sort of thing that it can be more inferred rather than. I feel like that's window dressing that they put on Spielberg's film. I think that's Crichton trying to sort of sneak in that stuff, and then Spielberg being like, "Yeah, we'll have a bit of the sort of the more deep things." But at the end of the day, it is a movie about dinosaurs attacking people in a theme park.
It's meant to be more fun with some horror, with some adventure. But they do have a scene or two where they mention things, and mostly the film focuses on is it a good idea to bring dinosaurs back to life? They might eat us. That's the main thing. But there is
the thing is, even that concept
stuff.
is like like the underlying stuff is linked to it's chained to the ball that is. Again, the moral question is that should we bring back dinosaurs thing?
Yeah.
Obviously, they're playing it straight in the story with a bit of like sort of tongue-in-cheek humor from Goldblum and the others to sort of for like more situational comedy with it. But again, it's just that concept. It's like, okay, we're going to talk about something that's quite real. The messing with nature. Let's just bring back dinosaurs. And we'll bring back a T-Rex and some raptors. And the herbivores, it's a bit less of a risk. Let's get the carnivores in on this shit before we've actually, oh god, there's a lot of I don't know. It's very bizarre. It's entertaining though. I'm by no means ragging on it as like a negative, but it's certainly goofy to go along with how serious it's played.
I mean, it definitely has its bits where. I mean, let's go through it, right? Because I wanna just break down a few the structure of it and how it plays out, right? But so one thing that I love about I think Spielberg does this a lot with his films. He always has because it's got to be a blockbuster, right? You got to bring your audience in. The opening scene is like with many of his films, a separate bit where it's like a teaser for the audience where you get a brief glimpse of a dinosaur. And you've got the whole opening scene is nighttime. You've got the park ranger and a bunch of the workers trying to bring in this dinosaur, and they're trying to move it to a new enclosure or whatever. And then obviously it goes wrong and someone gets eaten, and but you don't really see. It's this intense sort of build-up scene where it's like, look, dinosaurs, but you see the eye of the dinosaur. That is all you see. And it's just this.
Well, it's a good setup as well for the raptors as characters and antagonists.
And it is, but it's just this really sort of intense opening that draws the audience in, and it's like, oh, we want to see what these dinosaurs like. Look, there's a dinosaur. Someone just got eaten by a dinosaur, but we didn't see it. We want to see more. And I think it's something that Spielberg in particular does in almost every one of his films, because I can think like Indiana Jones does it, and several other films that he's made.
It's like a prologue, isn't it?
Yeah, it's because he just adds these little like action scenes or like intense or fun scenes right at the beginning of the film, and then you get the introduction segment afterwards, and it just draws the audience in. I think Jurassic Park does that very well, because again, you don't see, especially not a carnivore dinosaur, you don't see, and the raptors even later. You see a T-Rex after halfway through the film, and then you see the raptors in like the third act.
Well, you see the raptors until a certain point where they disappear, but we can talk about that later.
But yeah, so opening scene, build up, and I love that scene. This is nice sort of. It's almost creepy. There's elements of horror, but it's and then after that, you get introduced to basically all your characters, but in different scenes. And you get introduced to the concept of the park as well. But so you get your main characters introduced. I'll be honest, I can't remember which order it is. I think it's first you get the lawyer scene, which again, I'm trying to not go through all the plot bits. But so you get introduced to the lawyer and the concept of, there's this park that, we're not sure how, the investors are a bit worried because someone's got eaten. We need some people to come check it out. And so you get the lawyer talking to some people about, the park and things. Then you get introduced to I think the main characters, or it might...
Yeah, it's the main two.
Yeah, basically our main two characters played by Sam Neill and
Laura Dern.
Sam Neill and Laura Dern.
Both fantastic actors.
Yeah, I love, and I haven't seen them in many films. The only films I've seen Sam Neill in is I think The Piano, which is that one. I think it's called The Piano. He's very good in that. And then also I've seen him in a couple of things, but not much. So Sam Neill's someone I kind of want to see more of, to be honest. But he's a good job in this one. He does a good job. And then Laura Dern, obviously. I haven't seen her in much either, but she's in Star Wars. I know that. She's in some.
Yeah, she's in a lot of stuff recently. She was in Marriage Story as well.
Oh yeah,
She's
yeah.
one of the lawyers.
Yes, and but I've seen her in some like old films as well, like before Jurassic Park, and yeah, they're both suitable. They're like, I love their characters. Sam Neill has his arc of I hate kids to yeah, I can deal with kids because.
And they perfectly set that up in that scene as well, because he's explaining not only the raptors and what they can do, and also predicts a character death later on, but also he's talking about how vicious these things are to a child and frightening.
Yeah,
them.
he intimidates this one kid, and it's funny. And I love he's got this big claw that he's digged up. And he's like, slash at you here and here and here. And it's like, yeah.
It like pokes him in the butt later.
Yeah. But then he has this conversation. Obviously, they show their enthusiasm for the dinosaurs. They're digging up dinosaurs, and he's like, oh, look at this raptor skeleton.
Yeah, it's all together.
Yeah.
It's all in one piece.
Yeah, it's quite an intact one. But they're basically showing off that this is a skeleton of what you'll see later, and then he describes what they do, and as you said, it leads up to a character's death later on in the film, and it's all these sort of can't remember the term, but foreshadowing. That's the one.
Yeah, it's like efficient setups and payoffs is what it is.
And then the whole kid thing, and it's like, you ever want to have one of those? And they build the relationship of Dr. Sattler and Dr. Grant, which are their two characters, and then Richard Attenborough shows up, and he's like, hello, you want to come visit my park? But
I'm a fucking madman.
Yes, he literally just lands his helicopter in the middle of it, and he's like, I just helped myself to some champagne. And he's like, I own an island.
I've cloned dinosaurs.
Yes, you want to come to my island on the coast of Costa Rica? And there's
I've got a lawyer and a pervert.
Yeah. No, I love his character though. I know he's completely different in the books. They in the books he's meant to be actually a quite hateable character, but in the film I love him. He's a great character.
Well, he's got like such a nice sort of showmanship to it, even though there is a lot of it that you can hate about him, and he is the antagonist of the film in a way, but he does feel like you can see that by the end he feels remorseful about the whole thing.
Which I think,
but and there's the fantastic running motif of his like dialogue of saying spared no expense.
Spared no expense.
'Cause he's trying to big up his park so much that eventually he uses it ironically to talk about how everything's gone so fucked up.
Yeah, it's because in the film they do a good job. He's this enthusiastic character. He's invested in his park, but he's also a businessman. But they make it seem like he's more in it for, because there's a scene later where the lawyer's like, oh, we could have a coupon day or something, and it's like, it's not just about the money. Everyone in the world deserves to see the dinosaurs. I'm just building this park for the sake of people being able to see dinosaurs. Whereas it'd be it's more of a business thing, but they make him seem like he's really invested in it, and that's why I think it's completely different from the book, where I don't think he's as heartfelt about it. I think he is more just, I want to build a park full of dinosaurs.
Well, he's kind of presented as like a visionary in this film. But by how he's treated by most of the characters to begin with. Obviously, they slowly start to turn on that perception of him as stuff, even before stuff has gone, like hog wild. Like, by the time they've seen the entire park and they have like that dinner. They're already like they already say like even the guy they brought in with Ian Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum's like
he questions.
He was a proper character. Like he's the first one to be like even if you guys brought me in and I'm supposedly your yes man, I'm saying no to this. This is horrendous.
And even I think Hammond I can't remember his first name. But John Hammond. John Hammond is the character's name. Even he says, "Oh, the only one on my side is the blood-sucking lawyer," because the lawyer's the only one that's like, "Yes, this could make a lot of money." Everyone else is like, "What? Dinosaurs? Dangerous? What are you doing?" And like, you can't control it.
To be fair, it's the best motivation that you could have for this sort of film.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're gonna like do this out of economic greed. It's like we're gonna do this for financial gain. Whereas, like in some of the other films where they're like, we're going to make dinosaurs be in the military.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah, no.
and there's only one thing I love about this, one of the sequels, and that's in 3, where it's Alan Grant, which is Sam Neill's character, is dreaming, and then he's on a plane, and then a raptor turns around and they lip sync with the raptor's mouth. "Hey, Alan," and then he wakes up.
Yeah, and it's like, what? Why? Why is that even a scene in that film? Though? It's hilarious, but it's hilariously bad.
That's my point. Yeah, it's like, yeah.
Nah.
But personally, although I'm not particularly adverse to the second film, I prefer that clip in the third film over everything in the second film.
Yeah, no, I have a soft spot for the second film, but obviously, I'll say the plot of the original film is reasonable, right? It's like, it makes sense. Every sequential Jurassic Park film makes no sense whatsoever. It's, we need to rescue the dinosaurs from the island. We want to capture dinosaurs and bring them back to the mainland. Oh, we need to go rescue our son that's been lost on a dinosaur island for like 3 months. And then they're like, oh, let's build a new Jurassic Park, because that went the first time.
I was going to say, and then somehow it got even stupider after that, and then they started like training raptors to run alongside Chris Pratt on a motorcycle. Yeah. Like,
Velociraptors have military applications, and then even the most recent one where it's like, oh, Jurassic World. Apparently they built Jurassic Park on an island that has a volcano. That was a great idea, wasn't it? Because they literally just are like, the recent films just forget everything about the old films and are like, you know what, Jurassic Park was a good idea, let's do that again, build one, it goes wrong eventually, and then the most recent one, it's like, yeah, let's change, like, Site B doesn't exist, there's a volcano on the island now, don't remember that being mentioned ever before, and then military applications of dinosaurs and...
Joe, you can't be too hard on those films. I mean, like, you know, it's such a shame that those writers had a brain aneurysm right before writing that script. Like, but you know, it just happens sometimes. You know, sometimes Hollywood wants to hire out to people who, unfortunately, the lights in their brains have stopped blinking.
But anyway, right. So the rest of the films, like, some of them are still. I'd say even the recent, like Jurassic World. That one in particular is like okay. It's like, that's an enjoyable film, but
Fallen Kingdom is the one where it just goes.
Fallen Kingdom's a mess, and the 2 sequels from the original, I like The Lost World, but it doesn't make much sense. And the third one has some good, like, cinematically has some good sections, but overall the story is like probably one of the weakest stories of any of them, to be honest.
I think I completely agree.
Because it's like, why the hell would you go back to that island for one kid? I mean, I get the parents, but everyone else is like, why?
They needed Tom Hanks from Saving Private Ryan and that entire squad to have done that. That as well. That's a Steven Spielberg link, so that would have been hilarious. Tom Hanks, he's still alive from World War II. It's like, we need to send you to Costa Rica. Yeah, then he gets stranded. It's every Tom Hanks film after that. He gets stranded and then he gets bumped on the head and becomes Forrest Gump.
Anyway, let's bring it back to Costa Rica, back to where we were. So the film. Get introduced to the main characters anyway.
We get introduced to the kids a little bit later. I think about around the halfway point.
Yeah, the kids turn up just before they go out to see the park. But before that, you get introduced to one of my favourite scenes, just because of this. This is one that's actually kind of ridiculous. But you get introduced to Dennis Nedry. I can't remember the actor's name, but basically,
he's the guy. Is he the guy from Space Jam?
I
fat
think
guy
he
with
is.
the glasses.
Yeah.
Yes,
but
yeah.
He's such a weird, because he's basically both the bad guys are introduced here. Like, John Hammond is like partially an antagonist for Bill. You know, his part of what he's done, but he's not really an antagonist. Our main antagonists are actually introduced at this cafe in Costa Rica. You got this fat computer nerd and this like random guy who's like, you know, he's gonna hook us up some dinosaur DNA. But it's just the fact of how clumsy I think they call him clumsy in the film of Dennis Nedry's character is, which inevitably gets him killed because he's like, oh yeah, I can do. He's like trying to pull off this like Mission Impossible. I've got to get 15 minutes, get the Jurassic Park DNA in and out, get it to the docks, and then get back. No one will notice.
To Ocean's 11 for a little while.
And I love the scene where they're like chatting, and he's like, Dodgson, and he's like, you know, you gotta. He's just drawing so much attention to this like secret.
I mean, as well that clip or that the screen grab of that has been memed to shit like that. See Nobody Cares is a meme that's been spread around the internet for like a few years now. So.
I love that scene though. It's funny, and there's like the whole like whipped cream can that he uses. It's like you know, it's like, oh, you can hide it in here, and he's like, he has that laugh where he literally sounds like a dinosaur for a second because he just squeaks when he opens the bottle, and he's like, oh, it actually, why are you this excited about a whipped cream bottle?
I don't know, maybe there was a brand deal that fell through. Who knows?
But I love that scene. It's one of my favourite scenes for some reason. for no particular, it's just funny.
Well, it's one of those moments here where it, like the thing about, I think, like Steven Spielberg films, and especially with this one, is that it's kind of hard to pin down the genre, except like sort of like a monster movie.
Well, yeah, it's like
because it's kind of like a comedy, it's kind of like a spectacle movie, kind of like a family movie, and it's kind of like a fucking horror movie sometimes.
Which is why I classify it as like the nearest thing you can get is adventure. And again, it's like dinosaur monster movie, but adventure is it, because adventure can go in many different directions. You've got a little bit of horror,
or sort
a little
of
bit
like a disaster
action.
film.
Yeah, disaster film. Yeah, there's many things you can classify it in, but yeah, it does branch out into all these things. So Dennis Nedry gets introduced, and the whole plot of, you know, this is how it's going to go wrong. He's going to try and, you know, mess stuff up by accident, basically.
Well, and obviously on purpose, he sabotages the island so that when they're you know, like once the characters have arrived and they've all been established, and you have Ian Malcolm being introduced by the lawyer, the kids come along and they're on the tour.
Yeah.
That's when he strikes with his plan to steal the embryos and sell them to another company so that they can, you know, so because supposedly he's too greedy and he's not being paid enough or whatever.
Yeah, so that's like they have this introduction section that, you know, introduces most of the characters, and then the last characters, well, most of the last characters, you get the two kids later on, but Goldblum gets introduced on the helicopter and, you know, he's quite the character. One of my favourite versions of Goldblum. He has the dinosaur laugh that even he can't recreate, because people have asked him to, and he doesn't know how he did that. But anyway, and then, you know, it's the adventure begins where they all go to the island, and the film then reveals its first full dinosaur, and, you know, the CGI for the most part in the film still looks good, but the brachiosaur does look a bit dated. I was gonna
sorry. When you said that the CGI looked good, I thought you might be talking about that scene, but no. I was gonna say on rewatch, I agree. Like the shortcomings of this CGI is completely the daylight. The sunlight is the issue.
Yeah.
Whenever the monsters are in dark or like in partial light, they look really good.
Well, here's the thing though. Most of the dinosaurs are shown at night, especially the carnivores. And they mix in CGI with practical effects, because they have.
And that's part of why it works so well.
Yeah, they have a full model of a T-Rex, pretty much. They've got the full head and like the most of the body, I believe they had, but it was mostly the head they used.
Yeah, I think it was the head and the torso.
Yeah,
because
they
then
had
obviously
an object.
there's no point
for
having
it.
no point having the legs, because obviously they're going
Yeah.
to, if they were going to use the top half, it means they're going to be sort of moving it on wheels or whatever below, or like puppeting it
But
with like cranes and stuff. And obviously having the tail probably wouldn't, because it's not moving. Again, you're only going to see, you only really see it from the sort of side and front angle, really.
yeah,
To be fair, they might have the legs and tail for if they're doing like a different angle, like from the front or something, where it's like static, but the head's moving around.
yeah. No, they do a ton of stuff with.
It looks really good.
Yeah,
the puppeting,
most
by the way.
when they do have a physical version of the dinosaurs, the animatronics. That's the one I was looking for.
The Triceratops looks really good.
Yeah, because the Triceratops. Yeah, that's the thing. It's when, because you say, in daylight, like the only ones that look a little bit off are the Brachiosaurus at the beginning, because it's so up front and in like don't forget though, this is what 27, 28 years ago.
I do think that they are dated, but I again, putting it in the context of like, what year this was, how revolutionary it was for visual effects, CGI effects specifically. I can forgive, the Brachiosaur, that big first one. I can forgive that looking like Jar Jar Binks' butthole, because I know that only a few years later it would become that. So, and it looks about on par with the prequel CGI. So.
Here's the thing as well. If I watch it on VHS, like I do have, it looks fine. But that's because everything that's like the whole scaling of it is completely different. Whereas I've seen it also on.
Another point of that is obviously the resolution of that.
Yeah, everything, basically all the contributing factors in the older the way people watched it 20 years ago, it looks realistic. But now, if you watch the DVD or the Netflix version, which I have seen, you can see the edges. You can see it's like you can kind of see a little bit of green screeniness. You can tell that it's not real.
Obviously, you've watched it on the VHS. I recently watched it on the Blu-ray. As I've also watched the Netflix version, and yet I think that's part of the issue, is that it's similar. It's similar to why a lot of people felt like there's a great video on by a YouTuber on like VHS tapes. But basically, they cite VHS tapes and they cite the film Alien, and how when Alien was on home video, it was actually way scarier for people because you physically couldn't see the alien even when it did show, and like the film was so dark that you had to really squint for it. Now, it's not the best, in terms of what you want as a filmmaker. Like, if you're a filmmaker, you want people to see your film, but for like a home viewing, being limited by that technology, but also having that technology at all, to do home cinema. I mean, it revolutionized how, your modern consumer and, your modern, cinephile watched these sorts of films and got to experience them. And you are dead right when you say that, how people actually watched this at the time on home video, is how they experienced it, and it looked fantastic because of that compression. That said, obviously the cinema doesn't have that. It probably still looked as good back then because, again, it's like old PS1 games or whatever. They used to look like, like those little like polygons that used to look like Johnny Vegas or whatever his fucking name was from Vice City. It's like was it Tommy Vercetti?
Tommy Vercetti.
Yeah, he used to look like an actual person, but now we look at him and he looks like a Lego man.
It's when you come through, because we're in a digital age where everything, like to even the new Jurassic World and all that, they do in terms of CGI, right? Some of the stuff they can do now is far more impressive than what they could do for almost 30 years ago. But they show that off a little bit too much. A film from the 90s. It does sometimes with the Brachiosaur scene, with some other scenes where it's daylight and they're showing a lot of dinosaurs. Some of the background dinosaurs look fine, but when they're a bit closer, when they're like moving past characters, which I can see a screenshot of right now, they either have to blur it out a bit to make it look more bearable, or they have to.
Well, the motion blur makes it look more real anyway, because motion blur is something that we actually experience when we watch something through film. I actually think that still looks pretty well.
Some of it does
pretty
look
good
really
considering.
good. But
Yeah.
there are little sections where, like, because as I said, you said most of the daylight stuff. I think some of it still looks really good, but especially the Brachiosaur right at the beginning is one of the most. It's one of the bits where when I rewatch it and I'm like, God, you don't look as good as you used to, do you, Brachiosaur? Just because he's getting old.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some.
Well, the animation where it sort of pops its front leg, it stands on its back legs.
Yeah.
It's almost completely identical to one of the animations from the A New Hope re-release.
Yeah.
You know one of those CGI
I know.
aliens that actually looks surprisingly like a Brachiosaur.
Yeah, some of the CGI is starting to get it's a bit dated in comparison to the digital stuff that can be done now, I'd say, but. The animatronic side of things, very good. The whole T-Rex scene still looks amazing, but that is
I think the raptors are probably the best animatronics, though. I think that also was that end scene where, or not the end scene, but one of the end scenes where the kids are in the kitchen they're running away from the raptors. Those raptors look fantastic, and it's actually reflected in their acting because they are physically looking. Yeah. At raptor props, whereas nowadays there'd be like a tennis ball that people look at.
I know.
As like a visual marker for. But these kids, and even then when you talk about the T-Rex scene, part of the wonder of the practical effects being blended with the special effects is when the practical effects are in use. Sometimes there's some very, especially in this film, there are some very wild sort of stunts and unexpected things. Like in that scene, for instance, the window, the top window
when
from
it
the
bashes
Jeep
through the
falls
top of the window.
Those kid actors were not expecting that. That was a complete surprise on set. So their reactions are completely genuine. The moment where Sam Neill grabs little Timmy, or whatever his name is. I think his name's actually Timmy. And then the Jeep falls down. They did that for real.
Yep. No, a lot of it... A lot of it they do quite practically, and that's what makes it... It's the blend of... When they have to use CGI, they use CGI, but they do it well enough to fit in with all the practical stuff. And there is a lot of stuff. So I'm not going to go through much else of the plot. We'll skip ahead. I just still love the introduction of the dinosaurs in the Brachiosaur scene. CGI looks dated now, but the scene itself is still... You get the theme tune kick in, you get the characters, it's like dinosaurs, and then they're like, we have a T-Rex, and then you get the whole sequence where they, get to the visitor center, do all the stuff, and they converse about the moral dilemma, they see baby dinosaurs being hatched, all that stuff. But yeah, and then get introduced to the kids, that, you just need kids in the movie, obviously, for Sam Neill's character to be invested in, and for it also, I think it's for the audience to be like, so that kids can, immerse themselves in it.
I'm gonna be honest, because we were talking about the mix of genres. It doesn't feel strategic because it doesn't feel artificial, but upon reflection, it does feel strategic in a way, because again, it's like you put kids into the movie. It's that 90s trend. They always had the kid sidekicks.
Yep.
Scorpion King had it. The fucking Phantom Menace had it. With little Jake Lloyd, Anakin Skywalker. ILM did the effects for this movie, so that's another point where I wanted to talk. That's why I was mentioning Jar Jar Binks' asshole, because it's very, very, important. We addressed the fact that this is, of course, basically the predecessor to those effects, and it's obviously used much better. Going to talk about George Lucas, going to talk about the re-edits, because I knew that the moment I got to do this was going to be, it's going to feel so good. Yeah, Star Wars exists, baby, and we're talking about it, but not talking about it.
But yes, I know.
But anyway, back to the actual film. But the child actors, I hated them upon first seeing them, but when the dinosaur stuff starts to happen, I actually found them more likable because they were acting more reasonable.
No, I think...
But when they're just shitty teen and sort of know-it-all kid, I'm going to be honest, I found them just as insufferable as Sam Neill did.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. They purposefully, especially Timmy, like the girl is bearable. She's just like, she said I should ride with you because it'd be good for you. Like that's kind of funny. But the kid being like, I read this book and I want to sit with you, and it's a bit much. It's like, you calm down, kid, calm down.
Reminds me of the kid from Home Alone that everyone thinks is Kevin McAllister when he's the neighbor kid who's messing around with their shirt, their stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. I also find it a bit cringy that some of the kids' early bits and the whole Sam Neill thing, but it's still supposed to be lighthearted.
Yeah, and that's made up for later anyway. Again, when they're in that survival situation, because the kids start to, well, apart from Timmy, but the kids start to have some uses. Timmy doesn't. Timmy's more of a MacGuffin later on, but he's less unbearable because you know he's knowledgeable on the dinosaurs. He's scared, so he's not exactly going to be. He doesn't talk all the time, but as well, he's the one that's majorly in danger later on. But then you have you have some poor '90s setup with the girl Lex. The hacker trend in the 90s where I'm a hacker because I use a computer, and then that as well as like it's a Unix system or whatever it was. And it's like I just gotta find the file and then I can open the doors or close the doors.
Basically, I know how to use a computer.
And it's like a physical 3D map of the files. It's like that episode that they did parodying virtual reality in Community, where it's like, I've got to physically open the files with my hands!
But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some flaws in there. The kids.
It's not, again, that's not like movie ruining, but it did take me out of the movie, because I'm like, oh, I remember when this was a trend. It's like, at least in The Matrix, like, you know, when they have that trend, that it's warranted.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like, okay, we're in the 90s. I have logged onto a computer once, and I'm now a hacker because nobody knows what that means yet. They don't understand that it means like, okay, I know like code and stuff. It's not that I can I can navigate a desktop. But then in this film, I'm not sure if I've spoken to you about this before, but did you? Because earlier I referenced that one of the raptors goes missing. Do you know where it goes, Joe?
Which one are you talking about?
There's the raptor that ends up in the T-Rex's mouth. Where does it go, Joe? It does come back, but where does it go?
I know. There's a split scene where it's not there. I remember this.
There's a frame where the raptor is completely absent from the movie.
Are you going to notice that frame? I mean, no.
Well, people did, but that's more like people like us, or like, you know, visual effects artists that obviously go in and like deconstruct it, saying, oh, what can we do here to improve our own craft? That's more like historical sort of analysis rather than, you know, like again, no moviegoer is going to watch that, and they play it at enough of a frame rate, and you know, to sort of so that's, you know, it's animated at a high enough frame rate where you don't even notice it unless you are doing frame by frame. However, sometimes, and obviously this is how they originally found it. In the blink of an eye, it will be gone, and then it will be back again. Sometimes you can see that with your physical eyes, but it is very rare.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I thought it's just like such a. Again, it's not like a negative, but it's such a character piece of like character building for this film. It's just like, it has those sorts of movie mistakes, and yet, you know, it's considered by many to be a masterpiece, and it completely compensates for that.
I mean, it's
because
not just...
it all works. So.
I'm not going to go through any other plot bits other than maybe a couple of ending bits, but basically they build up to the T-Rex scene, which is arguably one of the best. I know the raptors in the kitchen and a couple bits with them later on are really good. They're standout scenes, but I would say the T-Rex scene is the iconic scene from the film.
Yeah.
Especially because the way they get around the CGI thing is not only they have rain and an animatronic, they use the animatronic wherever possible and all the close-ups.
And darkness.
They had darkness, rain. Basically, that whole scene looks almost perfect, just because they've hidden it all in there's so many things to work around.
Yeah, it still looks fantastic today because of those.
Yeah.
That's a thing as well, is that it's commonly used in a lot of, like, you know, examples of, you know, good visual arts. Like, I think the film Reign of Fire, which is about like dragons in the post-apocalypse, has. They use dragons very sort of sparingly in daylight, but when they do them, to sort of compensate for the issue of them looking so sort of, you know, like with the lighting, because that's the thing, is that the main issue with CGI comes down to how it's lit and how it's rendered in that light. But in Reign of Fire, before they could do sort of stuff like that, you know, they just said, oh, we'll just make the dragons a really dark colour and have the sky be grey and stuff like that. And, you know, so you can still have daylight, but it's not like shiny daylight. And then most of the time it's in darkness.
Yeah, just try and blend it in with the background where they can.
it's being intelligent filmmakers is what it is, and it's also it's not just like playing into the weaknesses of your own specific like filmmaking. It's also like strengthening it. It's not a weakness to not show what you've made in CGI or whatever. Well, your practical effects. It's just clever filmmaking on other levels of trying to emotionally invest your audience.
But yeah, so the T-Rex scene is one of those staple scenes where they combine CGI and animatronics perfectly to create a scene that still looks good to this day, and it's still that's a scary T-Rex. It eats the lawyer
dinosaur
off the toilet as well, which is hilarious.
Oh yeah.
And then
Jeff Goldblum gets like
he just like, falls in the
tiki
building.
Huts.
Yeah. But to be fair, I love him.
He has a but sorry, this is a bit of a CinemaSins thing. So he's hidden under the tiki like leaves of the toilet.
Yeah.
Of the toilet hut, right? And then when Laura Dern and the hunter bloke find him, he's fucking put a belt around his leg, but the leaves are still on top of him, like he's been undisturbed.
Yeah. I hadn't noticed that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
I think that was more of a rewatch thing than any specific thing.
I mean, they don't really like. I hadn't noticed he even had the belt around his leg or anything. So.
Well, they do. There's a line of dialogue from Laura Dern. It's like, he's like, because he's bleeding or whatever. Yeah. It's like, he's stopped himself from bleeding by putting his belt around his ankle.
Yeah.
But she still digs him up from underneath the leaves. So it's just like, it's one of those things where you could see, like, him putting. But then he's like unconscious. It's like okay.
Oh no, maybe he's just like, I'm gonna wrap myself up in some leaves,
You know what? No. You know what? I think he did it beforehand because he was gonna get really high.
Yeah.
And the T-Rex attacked.
But
it was just a happy coincidence that he started bleeding from there.
Yeah. But I know the continuity thing that you're on about, right? So. When a T-Rex walks out of the paddock, he breaks the fence down. When the electrics are down, he walks out, starts eating a Jeep, and then he pushes the Jeep with Timmy off a cliff. Where'd the cliff come from? Like
they start scaling down the cliff, and then Timmy comes down in the Jeep.
Yeah, it is.
You can sort of believe that maybe to the side, to the right or something, there's like a bit of land or something. Yeah,
because the T-Rex came out of the fence to the right. You could maybe assume that there's a separate bit, but he pushes it off a bit.
There's a drop or something.
He pushes it over a bit that has no fence already, and also how does he push a Jeep over a fence when there's like a meter high brick wall in the way as well?
Another thing though is that like when you go back to the scene earlier where the goat's there,
there's land.
The tree line, there's land, and the tree line is very consistent. So either those are some tall trees, or that's one of those suspend your disbelief moments.
It's a movie magic thing where it's like you kind of have to use your imagination to figure out, like, there's maybe there's a different place, maybe it's I don't know. It's very questionable.
It's a bit of a. I would say it's a negative, but again, it's like a hacker thing. It's like it's a negative that doesn't ruin the film, but I'm not going to give that in favor of this film.
I mean, the only thing is,
especially because it already has enough in its favor anyway. Yeah. But I'm going to put it on my tally chart. That's a cinema sin right there.
It's just because they want. It's like, how do we get from this scene to car goes over a cliff into a tree? They have to climb down it, and it's like, just have a cliff there. Just it's like they glued two bits together that weren't meant to be together, basically. And for the film purpose, it's fine, but it does have that doesn't make much sense. But we'll ignore it. But it is breaking the illusion a little bit. And then also, one of my other favourite scenes is Nedry's demise. Obviously, he switches everything off.
Brilliant, yeah. So good.
He's like, because the storm, there's a whole storm thing where it's like, by chance, there's a tropical storm that causes issues, and he's got to turn a bunch of electric fences off to get out, to sneak out the DNA and stuff, and turn off some security stuff, which is a great idea. What could go wrong? And then the fact he's just a terrible driver is basically what goes wrong. His glasses get fogged up, and he's trying to wipe his glasses, and then he gets lost in the park because it's a storm. Like, it's understandable, but also you work there. And he just gets lost. He drives into the sign which says which direction to go, and then he just spins it in a random direction. And he's like,
yeah. Even though, like, again, this is more based on what we see as audience members, but it's like it's clearly pointing left, but he's like, oh, I'll point it right now.
well,
spinning it. It's like
he's meant to be a dumbass, basically. He's a weird because he's meant to be really smart and technical.
That's the thing.
But he's also it's that movie logic. But I still, for some reason, I really enjoy his character. And it's like, I enjoy his demise. I enjoy everything about that.
Again, like that whole scenario is a bit contrived, but because it's the catalyst for the movie and then everything else is a bit more reasonable, like, I don't really mind it. But again, it's like, okay, well, so a storm just so happens to come in at the point where they're reviewing the park and all these characters are there.
Yeah, I mean...
you know, he's planned for this extensively, yet he can't escape. Like, you know, you'd think that, like, maybe he would have actually physically gone around and surveyed the park. Yeah. You know, like, physically, like, okay, so I need to be, like, here at this time. That sign points this way. Like, you think he would have made a map on it, like a paper map.
Yeah. Well, no, actually, it does say
he's both smart and stupid when the plot needs him to be. So
but he even says at one point, last time I tried it, it took me 18 minutes, so I can't do it in 15. And he's like, I'll try and... So he's already, he's pushing it, and apparently he already knows the route, and yet he doesn't, and it's... Yeah, it's not. Again, it's like the plot.
He's forgetful.
The plot is simple, and it has flaws, but for what it needs to do, most of it is executed quite well. He's not the focus of it. He's like a cutaway to how's he doing on his little? He's getting eaten by a Dilophosaurus.
Yeah,
fake dinosaur.
Which is that's great. That's great. Oh, is it fake dinosaur?
Yeah, Dilophosaurus is not a real dinosaur.
Oh, that's so disappointing.
It's
I love
based
that one.
on a couple of real dinosaurs, but Dilophosaurus, I believe, is not a real one. And the Velociraptors, as most people know, are way bigger than they're meant to be, and the whole feather thing. Yeah, Velociraptors.
Well, again, a lot of that can be sort of, you know,
movie
hand-waved with the idea that
it's
the frog DNA thing is actually a big part of that. With a lot of people, they go, oh, well, the frog DNA explains why they're scaling.
And to be fair, it's one of the points of the sequels where they're like, oh, we customized our dinosaurs to make them bigger and scarier. Yeah,
because that went so well last time.
I know. But anyway, so I love Nedry's scene. He's like a clumsy idiot, gets eaten by bloody Dilophosaurus.
If it wasn't for his charisma and that fantastic scene with the fantastic practical dinosaur there, if it wasn't for that, like,
no, he really.
You'd hate that. I think you'd hate that side plot if it wasn't for him and that.
Yeah.
That specific, the plot of that specific side plot, and that kind of story that it is, and the contrivances.
Yeah,
I feel like that is the new films, but the entire thing.
Yeah, it's like they focus on that.
That's an isolated part of it, and then it's gone from the movie, and then we're just in a good movie.
Yeah.
In like Jurassic World, and more specifically the second one,
they bring it back.
Fallen Kingdom. It's just like every character has a side plot, and some of them are so ridiculously stupid, and it's terrible.
Yeah, and they always have to come back right at the end, and it's like, the bad guy's like got to get his comeuppance, and it's like, but Nedry dies like way before the end. Really, he's like in and out of the picture real quick. Whereas in the as you say, in later films,
this might sound wild, Joe, but I think he's still alive somewhere on that island. And in Jurassic World 3, they're going to go and get Nedry.
I mean, but
he's blind now though, because the thing spits in your eyes and you go blind.
Well, it paralyzes.
But he's still alive.
Well,
it's like John. Yeah, well, that's a weird thing. He didn't get paralyzed. But,
well, no, I'm assuming it kicks in late. Like he just got knocked out for a brief second, gets back up, and then gets in his car, and the dinosaur just sat in. I mean, that's ridiculous. The fact that the dinosaur's just waiting for him in his car, but it's hilarious.
He's like a slasher villain.
Yeah. It's the element.
It's like Michael Myers sat in the passenger seat.
It's stereotypical horror of a lot of it, where it's like, the dinosaur. And again, they bring it back later, where like I know they foreshadow it, where the hunter goes out, the raptors are on the loose, and he's aiming at one. And then just out of the bushes to his right, pops out.
It's the opposite of the Homer Simpson meme.
What do you mean, Homer Simpson meme?
You know the one where he backs into the hedge. It's the opposite. Oh yeah,
it is like that. Head pops out of the bushes of the second raptor, and he's like, "Clever girl." as Dr. Grant mentioned earlier, they hunt distraction. They 2 other raptors you didn't even know were there. But it's that horror element again, where it's like just cliche, like the raptor. Because again, why wouldn't the raptor just eat him? It literally pokes its head out to look at him and then eats him.
Well, as well, he doesn't start shooting.
I know, he's like clever girl.
I was gonna say, if I was him, before I'd even taken the stock down, because you can still fire the shotgun.
It's the build up.
I would have been the Danny DeVito meme. Like, so I started blasting, and I just started blasting.
No, he's a hunter. Yeah. He knows how to do these things. He only
except he fucking gets eaten.
Yeah. I love her, and it's this whole thing of, first of all, why the hell is everyone on the park is like on this leave, and there's like 5 people working at the park at this crucial time. Because obviously
they explain how they've left, but not why. I guess the storm, but
there's partially the storm.
And why is it just the skeleton crew that's still staying behind? If that's the case,
well, at least you got Samuel L. Jackson there. You know.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah, but no, it is really...
For the short amount he's in the film.
One of the biggest flaws in the film is why the hell is there only like 5 people at the park?
Yeah. Especially when the day before they've got like hundreds of people working in the labs.
It is a weird one.
They come back off of the weekend break like, oh, all our research just got eaten by a velociraptor and we can't go back to our labs. Well, wonder if some people were there to, solve that issue.
But so the hunter is like the only one who's capable of using a gun, and he only uses the gun once, and that's when he's being eaten and he's already too late.
He doesn't even shoot though. Sam Neill shoots more than he does.
Yeah, and then apparently doesn't do anything because guns clearly not effective against dinosaurs.
Well, he shoots through the glass. Well, Sam Neill's a scientist, so he's not.
I know. You can assume that he
shown
misses.
In the fact that like. And there's also the fact that he can't use it anymore because you see that the shell's jammed in. It's like stuck inside the chamber.
Yeah, he's not a trained gun user, which is fine.
Yeah,
and that's.
But it was good though once he picked that up, because I felt like the entire time when the hunter went and he's the only one with a gun, I was like, why isn't? I know they're all scientists and they're going to be like unsure of them, but just for safety.
Yeah. Well,
why the fuck doesn't everyone carry a gun besides the kids, of course? But why and also like when he drops the shotgun and they're trying to seal the door, right? I kept thinking, I know Timmy's panicking right now, but Sam Neill should be going, Timmy, could you just kick me the shotgun, please?
I know it's
just without blowing your head off. Could you please come and give me the shotgun?
It's cinematic tension, okay? You need. It's the whole. I'll be honest. It's the whole disaster movie thing where it's like. People need to be idiots for there to be any tension. Yeah. Because if people are smart, some of them are, but if everyone's smart, then there's no worries. There's no movie. You need to
have cannon fodder. Yeah, you need to have cannon fodder. Yeah. And then besides the cannon fodder, then you have the smarter characters.
But yeah, and then raptors. Then you got the whole kitchen scene and the scene in that in the power bunker as well, where it's sort of horror raptors, where they're chasing them around the place.
There's the terrible wax arm that lands on Laura Dern.
Oh, Mr. Arnold.
that is a terrible.
It's not good.
That's the only bad like practical effect that they did. It looks so bad.
But
like for how good the dinosaurs look, it looks like. I mean, it looks really bad.
And I mean, why was his arm there? Why was his arm in that corner?
It's hanging from it.
It just drops down.
And then it's like because the way she reacts is like it's on her shoulder, and the way she's holding it, because she has to hold it or it's gonna fall off of her because it's a fucking prop.
But
it's like I'm imagining it in her mind, like Mr. Arnold has just put his hand over her shoulder and is statically standing there. It's like does she think that like Ghost is about to happen and Mr. Arnold's gonna be Patrick Swayze like around her like her sides or whatever?
Well, no, that's the thing. It's weird how it's like, again, we can compare it to any other Steven Spielberg film where he makes all these big blockbuster movies that are, mostly believable-ish, but a lot of them have all these like weird scenes that are like completely ridiculous, and we go along with it anyway because there's so much fun, or they're like, it's like he's like these horror scenes where it's like, this arm just came out of nowhere. but we're fine with that because we're being startled by a dinosaur right now.
Well, as well, it's the variety act, isn't it? It's the combination of all these things that makes his film so appealing to a lot of people.
And then you got like...
I do think in some ways that makes him jack of all trades, master of none in some respects. But I do think that obviously, because that's more for the level of filmmaking, but because it's all competent, it maybe not. Obviously, it's like, you got Dean Cundy as well as the cinematographer, who obviously famously did the cinematography for Jack and Jill, and nothing else. Never did any other films. Didn't do Halloween, not at all. There was totally someone else. I hear that J.J. Abrams was the cinematographer for Halloween. Dean Cundy, obviously famous for doing the Halloween cinematography. Up until Jack and Jill, was a very respected cinematographer. But I guess that like Adam Sandler was passing around the joint at that point.
Yeah, but I mean that makes sense.
Because that film looks like a garbage fire.
So you're saying that the same person that cinematically made Jurassic Park made another horror film, right?
Yeah.
So that makes entirely sense because there's a lot of shots that are very horror, like this kid by the door, and then the raptor appears in the window behind them, and there are elements of horror in the cinematography of the film.
It's really effective as well. Yeah, I mean, Dean Cundy, I think he's done a lot of horror, but I think he's also done a lot of other stuff. Dean Cundy, I mean, he's done a lot of stuff besides horror. I think he's done a bit more variety stuff, but he was just a generally good cinematographer, and you can see that in a lot of the sort of the sort of sweeping shots that you'll see where a character enters frame, and then we sweep into what they're focusing on, or what they're like for instance, I think a great shot is when Sam Neill and the kids are traversing the tree trunk and those are like roots, and then like we zoom round. It's like it's almost like the spin round that Michael Bay does. They spin round one of the tree trunks. Or one of the roots, anyway. And Sam Neill, is like picking up eggs and that. And we get the reveal that he's looking at eggs. It's all, it's like standard sort of cinematic theory and practice. But it's done
quite
really well.
I think they do.
And unless you say the horror scenes are then accentuated because of the, that build up of suspense. It's great.
There's a lot of that. The whole film was executed quite well. I mean, it has its flaws. It has some.
We didn't even talk about the John Williams score.
I know. I mentioned the theme, but the whole score is John Williams, so it's an iconic theme, just like Indiana Jones, just like Star Wars.
They're all evocative of each other, all those themes, but they are unique in the ways that count.
Mm-hmm. It's just it's something magical about a John Williams soundtrack sometimes, and when combined with the cinematic experience, it just works. It just works.
And this time it actually does.
Yeah.
I think obviously Steven Spielberg is the linchpin holding it all in place, but there are a lot of people, really talented people that were working on this at the time. It all works as an ensemble for this.
Yeah. And as I said, it's not this film. It has a simpler plot, and it has flaws in the plot, as we pointed out. But I don't think that's necessarily the focus. The focus is the idea of dinosaurs, adventure. It's the horror. It's the cinematic experience of, go to this dinosaur park, see the dinosaurs, things go wrong, scary dinosaurs, escape the island. It's the plot is not the focus. It's everything that comes together to make the experience of the plot. There's something magical about it in the same way that Star Wars had, and I know a lot of things are more successful than others, but Jurassic Park, the original film on its own, I think is quite a magical experience. It is starting to get dated in certain areas.
I think we feel very similar about, I think how I feel very similar to how you feel about this film, but with regards to the original trilogy. Yeah. With this one, I think because that nostalgia aspect is a little bit lessened. Again, that's not how I solely see the Star Wars films. Neither is that how you solely see this film. But I would still say that the original trilogy has magic to it, and I would say that I would agree with you saying that this has magic to it.
Yeah,
I definitely don't think I don't know whether or not this might be heresy, but I don't know whether or not I'd call it a masterpiece.
No, I mean I'm just saying for Steven Spielberg. This is one of his. It's not like one.
It's
his
the best example
but
of his film.
It's one of his very like this.
Yeah.
It's an iconic
It's like his
one
Pulp
of
Fiction
his,
or
that's all
Reservoir Dogs. It's like an isolated, like it's the perfect amalgamation of his sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Critically speaking, just foregoing the subjectivity angle, I think you could make a case for this being one of the best films ever.
It's always been on many a list. I've seen it in the top 100 films ever. Yeah. It is up there. But I also understand, like, for me, my opinion, I would put it very high, but I can see its flaws, and I'm like, yeah, I there are films that do stuff better than this.
Of course, yeah.
But,
I don't want to be needlessly contrarian. Don't worry, I do accept that this is a good film.
But here's the thing.
And I think that we can both wholeheartedly recommend it to people.
Yeah. But here's the thing, the argument creates something to talk about, doesn't it? It's like let's find the issues and then we can discuss it. That's the whole.
Well, when we finally do the original trilogy, I know that's going to be a mess. So.
Yeah. Look, my opinions on films change all the time. Is the thing.
Same. Yeah.
But Jurassic Park. I mean, my opinions have changed slightly, but it's always been up there for me. So.
Yeah, I think that comes down to mostly just again, it's like looking at other films and thinking this one specific thing was done better. But again, all the negatives that I've listed off, which again, admittedly are few, a lot of them just come down to personal gripes or nitpicks.
Yeah, or
a
just
lot of them. There are maybe two that I would consider major criticisms. Yeah. But besides that, even then, they're not they don't destroy the film. If I was gonna rate this film, I would put it probably between an 8 and a 9 out of 10, maybe an 8.5. If I was gonna do it a number score, I know we don't do that, but just because I don't know, I think that's how hot the hot blonde would have to be to visually communicate this film.
No, I would give it a 9 out of 10. It's missing that one point of there are some plot issues, there's some mistakes here, there's a bit of dated CGI, but. In general, the whole film as a whole is...
There is a lot to talk about with Jurassic Park. It's an iconic film, and on a technical level, just alone, separate from all the story elements that we were talking about, there's even more to talk about. It's a treasure trove of critical film discourse, and I think that we can both safely say that we love it for that.
Yeah. And it's definitely, again, it's another one that's a big influence on a lot of, especially, I mean, it's had 4 sequels already.
Yeah.
So 4 sequels, 5 films.
And they even had the terrible Steven Spielberg sequel called J.J. Abrams. Good night. Because I know we can't talk about anything more. I was just going to say, but he's Steven Spielberg light, or Diet Spielberg.
Yeah, and I'm just going to say, it's a must-watch film if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
And, just...
Okay,
Dinosaurs, am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, the dinosaurs are right, shit, yeah. Anyway, okay, yeah. That's been us at 2 More Takes. We hope you enjoyed, and I guess we'll see you next time.
Until next time.